Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll be reading The Black Anglo-Saxons by Nathan Hare, Chapter 9, page 97, The Insiders. It should be noted that Dr. Hare transitioned to the ancestral realm on June 10th of 2024 as we were in the midst of reading his book.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondent, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
The Insiders. It is perhaps predictable that the Black Anglo-Saxons, set apart and rejected by the white majority, would yet carry in their breasts a certain masochistic fondness for white companionship. This condition leads, among other things, to a sustained clamor for invitations to gatherings held by bored whites who are searching for the exotic and offbeat. Some insiders, as I call those who attend such gatherings, take trips as far as to Egypt to get included in the act. While touring abroad, they relish feeling like a foreigner, that is, a non-Negro, before jetting in to their jobs. Those unable to take such trips, even on fly now, pay later plans, sponsor make-believe cruises. In these, they pretend to stop over in countries like France, Hawaii, or Australia. They almost never drop their imaginary anchors in a country inhabited by Black folk. At home again, they will boast that they find more in common with whites, even if they are foreigners, than with members of their own race. Yet, they are tormented daily by reminders of conscious differences. This merely aggravates their desire for white comradeship. They hold to the principle that Negroes are born with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of white folks. In their private lives, Black Anglo-Saxon insiders appear convinced that the shortest route to heaven leads from the threshold of an integrated party. However, since such gatherings on this earth are all too few, they are delighted when some white minister declares that the kingdom of God will be integrated. They console themselves by saying that there won't be any segregation in heaven, and that we'll all be one when we get over yonder. It is regarded as a tribute to an outsider to have it said that he or she was much in evidence at some confab, social gathering, or mixed affair containing whites. Some are pleased merely to be seated in a nightclub visited by a party of slumming whites. The insiders quickly become all teeth in hopes that the visitors will be pleased and that integration won't be obstructed. As writer Gay Talese said in Esquire, they are so polite that there is very little honesty between them and their white patrons. Greetings, Forecast. How are you tonight? Thanks for tuning in. Insiders also delight in showing off their white associates. The height of prestige at a funeral or wedding is achieved if white friends, that is, coworkers or employers, are present. Distinction is also achieved if a white person visits their segregated homes. Social acceptance is equated with a visit to a jazz night spot in the company of some white friends, with their subsequent appearance at a party to talk about the arts. The white guests, often students from some nearby liberal college, attended by the Black Anglo-Saxon hostess, are likely to be asked to pose for pictures later to be displayed in the local weekly. In such places as Virginia and Kansas City, where whites are highly prejudiced, the chief technique is integration by invitation. At a Black Anglo-Saxon college in Virginia, I noted that to offset a law prohibiting integration in public facilities, insiders would mail out invitations to whites and thus rendered the affair a private one. White guests were invariably seated in the front row, although Negroes were placed in the rear whenever they weren't allowed to attend a white public event. These insiders were practicing, to borrow an overused Black Anglo-Saxon phrase, segregation in reverse. In situations of straightforward or head-on integration, the presence of one white person in a Negro group constitutes sufficient integration to elicit applause. One Negro in a white group is even better because they want to be the only one. For example, fashion shows with one or more white models are billed as integrated fashion shows. After stating that Detroit has some of the finest residential areas for Negroes in the country, a Black Anglo-Saxon newsman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, nonchalantly added the icing on the insider cake, integrated too. While most Negroes see integration as a means of achieving equality of economic and political opportunity, insiders seek it as an end in itself. A Camden, Delaware insider wrote to Ebony saying that Eisenhower had done a lot for Negroes, but that he had not done enough with Negroes. We have pictures of him, he asked, attending graduation exercises, attending a concert, or playing golf with Negroes. Insiders in the District of Columbia, on the other hand, stated that they felt close to President Kennedy and Dave Brinkley because they are our neighbors. Insiders will sometimes attribute almost magical qualities to integration itself. The daughter of a leading Negro journalist once wrote that racial integration is the only way to end all wars, at a time when both major hostile power blocs are white. Her thinking merely reflects the extent to which integration has become a sacred, mystical concept to the insider. His hopes and dreams of a raceless society are rooted in frustrations, the same frustrations felt by all Negroes in their efforts to achieve a way of life free of racial exploitation. The effect of this is that insiders, extremely class conscious in their relations with Negroes, know no class boundaries in their associations with whites. Any white person will do. Insiders of high status will freely consort with white persons of no status. Yet, because whites generally do not fraternize with them, they will themselves avoid other Negroes, or, as they would put it, will not practice self segregation whenever possible. For example, in integrated work situations, if white cliques will not accept them, they do not form their own, but scatter, eating their lunches and taking their rest periods in social isolation. So reports Noel P. Gist, an urban sociologist who has made studies of a factory group. The importance of white contacts may even seep into the relations between the sexes. Many girls coyly require that their beau to ask for a date at least a day in advance so that they won't get the idea that she's always available. I have observed, however, that no Black Anglo-Saxon girl will reject an invitation to a white affair, no matter how late she receives it or how faint her interest is in the man extending it. The frantic quest for white social acceptance thwarts the freedom of the individual Negro. He fears to reject white company should he wish to, lest he be accused of holding back integration. Certain liberal whites have similar fears in regard to Negroes. I was once accused of this when I turned down the opportunity to be the first and only Negro at the regular faculty of a Western white university. My reasoning was that however much I wanted America's colleges to be integrated, qualified teachers were still needed in Negro colleges. Only recently, I heard an insider school teacher teasing a fellow teacher because she had left a suburban integrated school where the pupils were white and there were two Negro teachers to come to a school in the Negro slums. A white teacher took me home today, she taunted, not disguising her delight. According to adoption agencies, there is a shortage of Negroes willing to adopt children, while whites hardly ever want Negro orphans. Hence, there are many Negro children waiting to be adopted. Despite this, an unmistakably Negro couple adopted a white child, going through a long court battle when the white mother changed her mind and sought custody. A National Insider News magazine applauded the court's decision to let them keep the child, hailing this as a giant step in the fight for equality. It's wrong to let Black families adopt white babies, and because the power dynamic is different. Because that white child is going to understand very early on that because of how our society is currently set up, that they have more power than their parents in a lot of instances. A famous entertainer, while traveling about the world, always takes her light-skinned baby with her, seldom parting with him for a moment. In other areas of life, insiders will live considerably beyond their means in order to maintain a residence in integrated neighborhoods. Walt Wright, the Afro-American columnist, has told of unannounced visits to homes in the better integrated areas where the host was embarrassed because the electricity was off and the guests had to take their drinks without ice. So they buy this big fancy house in this integrated neighborhood, but they can't afford to maintain it because the appearance of being integrated in Nouveau is all that's important to them. Unable to gain residence in lily white areas will compensate by long car trips to integrated shopping centers to make the smallest purchase. The Center for Research and Marketing Incorporated has revealed that Negroes are not shopping in department stores close to their residences. Rather, they are buying in suburban white shopping centers where they generally cannot live. Doing that is a violation of the first principle of economics when you're trying to organize your people for power. If you can't live there, you shouldn't shop there. Period, point blank. Similarly, although Negro beauticians have more experience in caring for the needs of insider women, as well as a personal involvement, more and more of these women are going to white shops, often at hours when white customers are unlikely to be present. The resultant complaints of Negro beauticians, with their implication that the hair textures of Negro and white women are not identical, have caused Black Anglo-Saxon women to recoil. But these women have already come to accept Caucasian hair as superior. So they're not even going to their own beauticians, like they're going to Sam's and Bo Rick's in attempts to get haircuts and hairstyles, and these places can't even do their hair adequately. No one can deny that most Negroes live in overcrowded, inferior housing. They rightly struggle to break out of these ghettos. However, insiders generally have less reason to do so since they monopolize the best of Negro housing. Nonetheless, they will choose to leave merely to follow whites out to the suburbs because they want to be the first and the only. One Baltimore insider went to his white neighbors and told them point blank, "Move and I'll go with you." Many other Negroes, long crowded into poor housing, wish suburb-bound whites would move away so that they could inherit some decent apartments. That was the thought, that they would be able to inherit those decent apartments. But what went along with those apartments when those white people left were the maintenance contracts that maintained those apartments, because they then got slumlords in place of those apartment houses, and they didn't maintain those buildings. These insiders are constantly copying white movements, traveling from their segregated neighborhoods out to the integrated suburbs. Later, they will leave them to return to the segregated cities. When the whites do likewise, they believe that whites, in the words of Joe Louis, can run, but they can't hide. While some Negroes are relieved to be free of whites and their dominance in the city, insiders will go as far as to enlist the armed services because the Army's integrated, although at present there is not one Negro in the U.S. Army with the rank of general. Well, that's not true anymore. But was that person, or are those people genuinely Negroes, or are they just black-faced white people? Chuck Stone, militant young editor of the Washington Afro-American and an NAACP worker, has referred to the integration neurosis of many insiders. Mr. Stone wants the same privileges as other U.S. citizens. Unlike insiders, however, he does not want to forget that differences exist between Negroes and whites. The implication is that if insiders had their way, the struggle for an equal share of society's benefits would soon be pushed into second place by the integration panic. Although no indictment of the basic goals of the sit-in movement is intended, Much of the insider's fondness for the various ends, whether it's a sit in, a walk in, a duck in, a swim in, a stand in, a kneel in, and so on, seems to me to be due to the timidity of some white liberals to whom nonviolence is a personal advantage. Many of the Johnny come latelys to the movement appear to have been moved mainly by the large, unanimous approval of white press. An illustration of the first sit-in movement, which started in Oklahoma City in the summer of 1958 and spread to the surrounding towns. The participants were elementary and high school students, as well as members of the NAACP Youth Council. The movement failed to get off the ground. This was not only because the grown-ups took over after the children returned to school, substituting committee work for direct action, but also because the movement was ignored by the white press. A search through the New York Times of this period from August 19th to September of 1958 turns up an occasional back page reference, but the headline issues were in the space race and the FABU's refusal to integrate Little Rock schools. Unlike the Oklahoma City sit-in in the winter of 1960, Greensboro incident occurred when there was nothing more to compete with than a few basketball games. It received white headlines and as a consequence attracted many Black Anglo-Saxon adherents who would otherwise have viewed the movement with disinterest or distaste. For the insider, the public claim of wanting Negroes to get ahead too often masks his own desire for advancement. A woman reader of Ebony from Gary, Indiana, wrote an indignant letter to the editors saying that America's 100 richest Negroes want at all costs one thing: recognition from whites. She added that they trample over the lower class Negroes whom they could help and try to get recognition from whites who neither want them nor need them. Working class Black Anglo-Saxons, on the other hand, often resent the climb of other Negroes, particularly their personal acquaintances. This is that crabs in the barrel adage. All invest interracial positions with prestige. Even when the new job pays less and ranks lower in the social hierarchy, they are willing to exchange the concrete gains of one position for the empty honor of another. The integrated individual is automatically considered to be going places or to have arrived, even if he moves among the most mediocre of whites. The insider is sometimes compelled to trade one form of discrimination for a modicum of integration in another area. A substitute teacher in Washington, D.C. stated she didn't get much work. She explained that this was because she was living in a white area where substitutes were less in demand, and also because the school board's dispatcher thought she was white. They don't know what I am. White teachers usually being reluctant to accept work in Negro neighborhoods. Far from complaining, she seemed proud of this. Actually, the area in which she lived was not white but mixed. Anything not predominantly Negro becomes white in the mind of the Black Anglo-Saxon. Those who can afford a trip to Europe delight in finding themselves the only colored person about. They enjoy even more being mistaken for West Indian or some nationality other than American Negro. Two insider school teachers touring France encountered a white woman who made the fatal error of expressing enthusiasm over meeting Africans face to face. The insiders replied coldly, "We're Americans." It was not the mere it was not mere patriotism that moved them to speak up and to omit any reference to Negro in the correction. At home, the insider will clamor for rented ballrooms and luxury downtown hotels and nightclubs that cater to whites while ignoring Negro protest organizations. At best, he will take out a life membership in one of them, an infallible means of getting his picture in the paper as he is shown handing someone a check. More often, however, money is spent to try out his twisting in some new downtown white hotel where he will applaud the warm service given by the help. One insider minister built a $100,000 home in an exclusive Hollywood location. He could sit in his heaven, as he called it, and overlook Beverly Hills and other exclusive white communities. Insiders of more modest means keep scrapbooks of photos with white friends to display to their Black Anglo-Saxon companions. Think of Facebook before Facebook. Association with whites is dear to the insider. A New York congregation got such a big kick out of being addressed by a white politician that they made him an honorary member, undoubtedly the only kind he would ever become. One insider religious leader urged his fellow Negroes to participate as much as possible in those church activities open to all races. He impelled, remembering the sporadic attendance of many Negroes in their own churches, to remind them that you must be present to be accepted and included, because white acceptance and inclusion with whites is the most important thing to them. This exaggerated affinity for whites is illustrated by the greeting of one Black Anglo-Saxon school teacher to another as they arrived for a workshop session. "Oh, you'll enjoy this workshop because most of the people here are white. You know, niggers don't have anything. This is above their heads." Then, after inquiring about where the other was employed, she queried, "Have you met many white people there?" Another female Black Anglo-Saxon telephoned a Negro columnist for the California Eagle to complain that she was only mentioned in his column in an abusive way. During the conversation, she revealed that Walter Winchell had kissed her on the neck the week before, since when she hadn't washed the spot. Still, the columnist was willing to bet the lady could obtain kisses more easily than mentions in Walter Winchell's column. The California Insider's reaction to Winchell's kiss was not atypical. It recalls Robert Kennedy's visit to Howard University, when many co-eds who had the opportunity of shaking hands with him said they didn't wash them for 2 weeks after. The insider orientation is reflected in the NAACP's plan to campaign for admission to fraternal and secret societies on white campuses. The president of an NAACP regional conference has written to the national headquarters of 17 such societies, demanding copies of their constitutions and membership applications in order to determine whether they contain any discriminatory clauses. This effort is at best a waste of time, energy, and money, which could be better employed in a sustained attack on public accommodations. So what he's saying is that instead of them trying to get into these fraternal and secret societies on white college campuses, It would be better if they were talking about being accommodated in bathrooms and water fountains and public pools and libraries. The insider seeks entrance into such havens of trivia as yacht and golf clubs. In Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, a tumult of hurrahs greeted the token selection of a Negro for membership in the Cosmos Club. This was mere window dressing, since he was not a resident of Washington and thus would be able to frequent the club only rarely. The infiltration of insiders into the leadership and control of protest organization is slowly turning the civil rights fight into a struggle for the right to take part in the more uncivil white pursuits. Indicative of this trend were the protests that arose when the war film The Longest Day had its premiere. There were complaints because no Negroes were shown carrying arms. To the Black Anglo-Saxon, it matters not whether the war is for a struggle for democracy or one in which a white nation drops napalm bombs on colored people, as in Korea and Vietnam. He seeks inclusion in the slaughter of any white man's war, on or off the screen. Led by insiders, the Negro finds himself concentrating increasingly on the chance to pay for admission to swimming pools, parks, golf courses, tennis courts, picnic grounds, and movie theaters, or for food at lunch counters and so on. This is perfectly all right in itself, but it is disturbing that the most enthusiastic campaigns have until recently been largely directed at such non-productive privileges rather than positive ones like employment and voting. To swim at beaches or in pools, play golf on courses, sleep in Pullman cars, pay money and eat in a coffee shop, all these are important, of course. However, there are no substitutes for better jobs, successful business enterprises, mass education, and the right to vote. Although Dick Gregory aptly calls this latter privilege the right to choose between the lesser of two evils, and we're still in that position today. Insiders do not understand that the status of the Negro is not altered by the chance to consume more if he has nothing to consume with. So what good is it to be able to go into places of public accommodation and into their businesses if we aren't allowed jobs and into their trade unions to have the same employment opportunities and protections that they get? As has been mentioned, insiders lack objective claims to status in the Negro world. Therefore, they seek to enhance their position through association with and acceptance by whites. One individual was swept from obscurity to nationwide fame by the revelation that, some years before, he had passed for white at Ole Miss, although for some unexplained reason he had kept this fact to himself until the Meredith case. He subsequently was the guest of honor at a number of important social affairs. No doubt, we may look forward to the day when some Black Anglo-Saxon will reap applause for having infiltrated the neo-Nazis or the Ku Klux Klan. Recently, one insider has actually complained because no Negroes were allowed to be in the John Birch Society. A leading weekly boasted that a miracle has happened in a legit theater because Sammy Davis Jr. was allowed to play the role of an escaped convict. The reason the role was specifically written for a white man. There was a similar acclaim more recently for Sidney Poitier's co-starring in the film The Long Ships. He played the villain, repeatedly torturing or threatening to torture white heroes. The forecast says he was listening to the lesser of two evils debate today about Trump and Biden. They keep putting us in this position. They want it to crash, and I say we let it burn. A fat black man did try to join the KKK and made videos about how they black friends now. He they black friend now. So there was a movie made about the Klansman, was a movie made about a black man that wanted to infiltrate the Klan. So it happens. These black Anglo-Saxons are everywhere. Although most Negro school teachers in the District of Columbia prefer jobs in the capital itself to those in the surrounding Maryland and Virginia suburbs, disparagingly calling them country schools, many Washington insiders will tell you that they would be ready to move out there instantly if notified that they had gotten a position in a white section. These teachers, in their turn, have difficulty with insider parents of pupils. One indignant Black Anglo-Saxon living in the slums of the district was furious because of her daughter receiving low marks. "I'm going to transfer my kid out," the insider threatened. "Anytime you make straight A's in a white school, you must be pretty good. This kid ain't never been in nothing but a white school before." It's assumed by the Black Anglo-Saxon that a white school is always superior to a Negro one, and that a Negro school with Negro teachers necessarily operates on lower standards than a white one. Too familiar with small northern towns in states like New Jersey, this is palpably ridiculous. Whites are often alienated by the overindulgent attitudes of the insider. A Jewish sociologist recently told me about two white liberals who attended a Negro school for master's degrees in the social sciences. They were so deified by their fellow students that they got sick, and now they sound like everybody else when they talk about Negroes. But the glory derived from association with whites is not restricted to academic circles. In Warrenton, Virginia, 3 Negro barbers gained repute through working with a barbership serving nothing but white patrons. The same is true of a beautician I know in Chicago. One woman insider of Tulsa, Oklahoma won local prominence because she worked as a maid in a store dealing exclusively with white customers. Black Anglo-Saxon physicians and government officials also acquire prestige from white nurses, white secretaries, white assistants, and white clerical helpers. Apart from providing a sense of philanthropic grandeur, giving employment to white persons also demonstrates that they are not prejudiced. A similar philosophy characterizes many Army officers, both in the regular Army and in the reserves. I was in a unit in Chicago where most of the ranking officers and newcomers were Negro. It was extremely difficult to get a promotion unless you were white, in which case your rise would be rapid and certain. This was a source of anger to many of the enlisted men, nor was the condition limited to our unit. In civilian life, where personal contact with whites is difficult to come by, a locale frequented by them in the present or the past is invested with charisma. What may be termed embalmed or mummified status accrues to the Black Anglo-Saxon who lives in a house that was once the abode of a white individual, of a renowned white individual. Insiders are also gratified when a white person of status, a Hollywood star, for example, stays at the same hotel they do during their vacation. Similarly, marriages held in white chapels have added prestige. The University of Chicago's Rockefeller Chapel is a favorite among the city's Black Anglo-Saxons, students and non-students alike. The prestige accorded to white structures recently dealt a body blow to the boycott tactic. It was proposed that Negroes boycott the Statler Hilton as well as other hotel chains whose Southern affiliates refused to honor reservations made by NAACP delegates. Negroes as a group had long been staying away from Northern affiliates of five and dime stores being picketed in the South, but the movement to keep insider conventions and banquets out of the swank white hotels was a complete flop. So they couldn't get them to stop participating in the economy of going to these hotels that had bad policies for their Southern brethren. Insiders relish interracial golden fellowship dinners and fetes that bring them into contact with coveted white speakers, white guests of honor, and white honorary participants. When President Kennedy appeared briefly at a sorority's national convention, the members were reportedly in seventh heaven. An insider newspaper woman who unwittingly missed the president's appearance said she could almost feel the goose pimples and chills running up and down her soror's spines. That weekend, the sorors also had a reception at which the honored guests were the then Vice President and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Lyndon Johnson. But in the ordinary life of the insider, far lesser whites are accorded smaller tributes. This indiscriminate enthusiasm for white speakers recently backfired when the West Tennessee Mississippi Conference of a major Negro denomination held its 93rd session. After an invitation had been extended to Reverend Clifford Davis to address the conference, church spokesman happened to note some stickers adorning his car. They bore the slogans, "Keep Ole Miss White" and "Help Ross Keep Mississippi Sovereign." The invitation was hastily rescinded. Human rights conferences, led by whites, are numerous. The Negro delegate who is able to come away with a certificate testifying to his new knowledge of human rights, as taught by white chairmen, consultants, and white speakers, appears to have been vaccinated with a needle of joy. Interfaith and interracial banquets are also popular, as are the other intergatherings at these events. White and Negro leaders get together to study and discuss the problem, all the while partaking of food served by working class Negro waiters. The head of the Chicago Urban League, Edwin C. Berry, voiced his disturbance at the superficiality of these interracial meetings. In an ebony editorial, he wrote, "Brotherhood Week, North Side, white matrons put on their oldest clothes, and South Side, Black Anglo-Saxon matrons put on their newest. All the way into town, white women say to themselves, 'I must not tell darky jokes,' while Negro women tell themselves, 'I must pronounce this correctly.' Both are on their best behavior, After the meeting, they go home and forget about it until the next race relations Sunday. The sins of insider parents are unfortunately inherited by their children. A very dark Negro girl, now attending a desegregated school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, insists that she feels more comfortable with white people than with colored people. As if to convince herself of this, she travels to and from school alone since she continues to live on a low-income Negro street, far removed from whites. You know, she's never gone to school with the colored, says her proudly beaming mother. Describing the feeling she experiences in a plush white hotel, one Black Anglo-Saxon woman wrote, "I feel safe and like I am at home while I am there because their kind, polite, and courteous service has not been equaled at any other hostelry here or abroad. I began relaxing as soon as the receptionist said, 'Welcome back, Mrs. So-and-so.'" So she felt more at home spending her money and giving her money to a plush white hotel than she did in a Black hotel because their service could not be matched by any other hotel that she had ever been to. She needed to expand her horizons. In a trade journal circulated mainly within the jewelry business, a white New York businessman talked of insiders. He said, "While most of our customers like Negro salespeople, there are some colored people that prefer only a white person wait on them. When a white man approaches a certain type of Negro customer and says, 'How can I help you?' his ego is elated." When his statement was quoted in the Negro press, it was criticized by the image makers, but it reflects the prevailing sentiment. When insiders themselves are sales clerks and receptionists, they smile obsequiously, ostensibly at white customers, but are quite rude to Negro customers, as any Negro shopper can testify. In more intimate areas of contact, insiders are very sensitive to insults from their white associates. For example, they are offended when whites, accustomed to the use of first names, neglect to call them Mr. or Mrs. Prior to 1960 presidential elections, about 500 members of a fraternity group's Ladies Auxiliary held a luncheon for Mrs. Richard Nixon. It was reported that Pat Nixon, a prospective First Lady, made a hit with the women when she assured them, "I want to shake the hand of every one of you." However, she was said to have slipped up at one point by referring to the women as "you people." This is a phrase resented by the Anglo-Saxon because it lumps him in with all the other Negroes. A Black Anglo-Saxon columnist wrote that Lady Bird Johnson apparently had less adequate advice on how to win friends and impress people among the Negro group. It is obvious that Miss Johnson had no information on the importance of meeting with such prominent Negro leaders as the wives. She was not advised on the necessity for letting herself be seen and heard by people who have much influence in controlling the vote. Just how important the influence involved was can be seen by the results of the election. Johnson became vice president while Nixon lost. In a white gathering, any reminder of their Negro identity is a source of embarrassment to insiders. A disgruntled Army sergeant stationed at Fort Sill in the segregated state of Oklahoma wrote a letter to the editor of Negro Digest suggesting that the magazine's name be changed to a raceless title. As a member of an integrated book club on the Post, he confessed that he was abashed by such a discriminatory name. Similarly, a young insider in a mixed high school wrote that he was ashamed to display the magazine in his classroom. Whereas most wives in interracial couples will tend to cook the dishes they were brought up on and know best, the insider wives I have known tend to cook the foods of their husband's ethnic group. They avoid traditional Negro dishes, although privately partial to them. In his book On the Road, novelist Jack Kerouac Carusac confessed that he left white society because its members had lost the ability to let themselves relax and enjoy life. My own observations and study of white gatherings have led to the same conclusion. James Baldwin, who has had more contact with acceptance by whites than most of us, concluded recently, white people seem to ask us if they ask anything, come into my nightmare with me, be like me, have abortions like me instead of legitimate children. There's no reason whatever for Negroes to want to enter white society. Surely the question remains open. And that was the end of section 10, section 9. And as we think about the insiders, thank you, Julian. As I can't repeat your name, but thank you for being here, Julian. How are you tonight? But as we can see, the insiders are people that want all of the different types of Black Anglo-Saxons want white acceptance. All of the different, uh, they all have different motivations that are slightly different, but they all want to take resources away from the average Black person. They all want to participate in white society and white economies. They don't want to build anything of their own. They only want to be accepted by white people, even to the point of being accepted as a pet or a fetish by a white person. And we have to get away from that. We have to point out these different types of personality defects and allow us to thrive as Black people, embracing our Blackness and embracing the beauty of what it is to be Black, whether it's the food that we eat or the dances that we do. We can't allow them to tell us something that we do is bad, then they take it, repackage it, and then sell it back to us, and we buy it lock, stock, and barrel. We have to begin to value the things that make us unique. I want to thank you for listening tonight. I will be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow night's going to be a little bit longer than usual because we're going to read the rest of the book. We're going to read until 8:30 tomorrow night. I thank you, Forecast, for being here, and Julian for being here. I know that excuse me. I know that Anthony McPhail is listening. I know that Brother Bakari is listening. I know that Sister Raw and the elders are listening with her. I want to thank the ladies, the Daycare Ladies Network staff. I want to thank the Jesse Kids staff, and I want to thank the Anthony Adrian Academy staff. Excuse me, I'm tongue-tied tonight. And I want to thank all my new listeners. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please subscribe to the channel as we will continue reading books written by Black and African thought leaders, and sometimes an occasional person that is not Black. that had a thought about Black people. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Peace.